Dan, it's Bob and Tony in our Connecticut TV studios. Welcome again to the show, Dan.
Good evening, Dan.
Hey, Bob and Tony, how are you?
We're doing well, Dan, and it was a pleasure talking to you a few weeks ago on Thursday Night Tailgate. Chris Mascaro sends his regards and thanks for that. Again, we're on the TV side tonight, and I had told you a few weeks ago, Dan, about my father, how big a fan he was of yours, especially having a name like Dante Anthony Pastorini, as I told you in the past. Plus, he would have celebrated his 88th birthday yesterday, so it's ironic.
Oh, is that right?
It's ironic that you're on the show, and thank you in advance for giving him so much joy during your playing days. He really, not only was he proud of his Italian heritage, he liked guys that were pure athletes like yourself. His favorite guy of all time was Paul Hornung, so he liked guys that were very versatile like you, so just wanted to throw that in there. But again,
well,
thanks.
Bless his heart, I really appreciate that, and I'm honored that he thought so highly of me.
He sure did. Again, for our folks viewing on their TV sets, a little background on Dan. He played 12 years in the league between 71 and 83, appeared in 140 games, threw over 100 touchdown passes, was named to the Pro Bowl 1975. Had also a great punter during his day. Punted 8 years in Houston for almost a 40-yard average, and played with a bunch of Hall of Famers, as we'll get as we go along here. But Dan, we usually start our show out. We like to hear about your early roots, your beginnings, like your early sports heroes growing up in California like you did, maybe your favorite teams as a young guy also.
Well, you know, growing up in California, naturally we had the San Francisco 49ers and the Los Angeles Rams, and I was always a John Brody and Roman Gabriel fan, but I was also a big fan of Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas. Watched them on TV many times as a young kid growing up. And Johnny U was kind of the guy that I kind of patterned myself after and tried to emulate, I guess, on the football field or imitate on the football field. But, you know, growing up in Sonora, California, we didn't have a lot of opportunities to see the teams play in person. In fact, I think my first professional football game was when I was in college, and I saw San Francisco play Green Bay at Kezar Stadium. My father took me to the game, and it was really something pretty special. And this is like a few years before I was drafted. And unbeknownst to me that, you know, in those few years to follow, that I'd be on those fields playing against those guys and becoming a part of a fraternity. And I was kind of in awe the first time I met Bart Starr. I was signing over here at Joski's. We were playing Green Bay, and it was my rookie year. We were playing Green Bay in the preseason, and he was signing his book upstairs, and I was just there for the local PR move for the football team, and you go to Joski's and sign autographs for an hour. And I begged the manager. I said, please, I want to make sure I get up to see Mr. Starr. I just really want to meet that guy, you know. And so I'm signing autographs, and all of a sudden I feel his tap on my shoulder, and it's Bart Starr. Wow. And he wanted to come down and meet me, and I was speechless. I could hardly talk.
Wow.
And, just a tremendous gentleman, and we became, good friends over the years. You play the game, you run into these guys, not only in competition, but you see them socially at various charity events. We all supported each other's charity events and whatnot. And it was really quite a thrill, and just an honor to be part of that group of many, many years.
And Dan, in your high school days playing out in California, how heavily recruited were you, and what ultimately landed you at Santa Clara?
I was heavily recruited by probably every major school. I wanted to go to college and play baseball and play football. I was drafted in 1968 by the New York Mets. Mm-hmm. And naturally, being the lowly Mets that they were back then, excuse me, and they drafted me way low but I was a shortstop, and I liked playing baseball every day and whatnot. And they wanted to make me a pitcher, and that was the same year they drafted a couple guys by the name of Tom Stever and Nolan Ryan. And I think they did. I think they had a pretty good career. I think. And so I turned down. They offered me pretty good money, and I turned it down because I wanted to go someplace where I could play both baseball and football. And not many schools would allow me to do that. If I went to SC, I'd play, but I'd have to play in the spring games and would kind of interfere with the baseball. But Santa Clara allowed me to do that. I actually went to Santa Clara on a baseball scholarship.
Wow.
And they didn't have football scholarships, but I also went there because of the coach, Pat Malley, who was I was blessed to have a lot of good coaches in my career, both not only in pros but in high school and college. I had a gentleman by the name of John Hanna, and this is about as loud as he would yell as I'm talking to you. He was a very mild-mannered man, and he was very philosophical, and he just made you think about things differently, and that the game was going to open tremendous opportunities for us, and to take advantage of the opportunities, but also learn from them. So there was more of a mentoring, and there was more to the game of football than just the game of football. And Pat Malley was like that at Santa Clara University. He was very much like a father figure to me, and the second father, and became very, very close with him. And then, going to Houston and being drafted by the Houston Oilers, third pick in the first round, and went Plunkett first, Manning second, and me third. Mm-hmm. And I was hurt mostly in college, which really kind of surprised me that I would even be considered. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was fortunate enough to be chosen to play in the East-West Shrine game and the Senior Bowl game. And I was voted captain of both teams, and it was, I guess, the opportunity for the pro scouts to see me play against, big-time competition. Mm-hmm. And, to me, it was just a bunch of bodies that had, it was a chess game. You had certain people that you take advantage of with the weak to the defense. It didn't matter what size they were or how fast they were. It was a pretty fun challenge. And fortunately, I had good games in that. And I guess that raised my stock up a little bit. And hence the Oilers drafted me number one.
Yeah, and the year of the quarterback, right, Tony? As we were talking about before the telecast. And again,
you never hear about that, though. You never hear about the year of the quarterback.
Yeah.
In 1971, it was referred to that back in 1971. But the year of the quarterback you hear now and all the NFL films and stuff is 1984 with the Elway and those guys.
Yeah. Marino and
Elway, and which wasn't a bad crop.
Not at all.
Not at all. Again, we are on the phone with former NFL QB Dan Pastorini. Tony.
Dan, it's a pleasure to have you. And the thing I realize is that you were a big baseball fan and a big Willie Mays fan, and you had played on a team in Alaska with Dave Kingman hitting these incredible shots. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Willie Mays was my idol as a kid growing up. I mean, I just loved watching him play. Say, hey, kid, Mr. Hustle. My dad played semi-pro baseball in San Francisco, and he played with the likes of, guys you haven't heard, Lefty O'Douls, and he played with DiMaggio, and he played with those guys in San Francisco. And he had an opportunity to sign with the Yankees when he was very young. I think he was like 17 or 18. And, back then you had to have the consent of your parents. Well, my grandparents were first generation. And I guess the guys that played back then were, guys that were bums and couldn't do anything else and whatnot, and they had bad reputation. So my grandmother nixed it and said that, my son's going to get an honorable job. So my dad was a butcher by trade and then got into the restaurant business. And I always wished to have one of his kids become a professional athlete. And I was his blessing, I guess. But, I played in Alaska the summer of '68, and we had Dave Kingman. Dave Kingman and I worked together in a warehouse up there. One of the laziest workers I've ever worked with in my life. That guy was just lazy. but man, could he hit a baseball. And he was a pitcher. And I'll never forget the first batting practice. He was throwing batting practice. The guy could bring it. And here he is, 6'10" or 6'18" or whatever.
He was tall.
He was tall.
Yeah.
And, and he could throw it. And the first pitch he threw, it was a fastball. We're taking batting practice, and he threw it right behind my head. He threw it so fast I couldn't move. And I just turned out of the batter's box, walked over, put my bat up. I said, I ain't hitting against that guy. And he had a curveball. He had a curveball that would break 6 feet. He had absolutely no control.
Oh.
So, but he could hit. The guy he hit a ball that I swear to God it was 300 and I think it was 325 or 335 feet down the left field line. He hit a ball that was still climbing as it was leaving the left field fence. That ball had to be hit 500 plus feet. I've never seen a home run hit that far in my life.
Boy.
But, I played with Dave Kingman. I played with Bob Boone. I played with Bob Gallagher. Bob Gallagher and I went to high school together. Played on the same high school team together. He was a first baseman and pitcher. And, who else we had? We had Jim Barr, Brent Strom, who's now the pitching coach for the Astros. But we had a lot of good talent. We had a lot of fun. The teams just come up there from the main 48 states, and they play us at night. We were kind of the entertainment for Fairbanks, Alaska, which at that time the pipeline was just being built, and you had one paved street, and that was Main Street of Fairbanks, and the rest were all gravel roads. And we stayed with families and everything, and I'll never forget we stayed with the Bowles family, Jim and Norma Bowles. And we worked for Chevron as warehousemen, and Dave and I worked. And this is when you bought gasoline, you filled your tank up, and they'd give you a set of dishes or a cup and saucer type of thing.
Yeah.
And so they had these in the warehouse, and Jerry McLean and I were roommates together. We were also teammates at Santa Clara, and he was wound up coaching the Santa Clara Broncos after we graduated. So I said, I think we can get these dishes for Jim and Norma. I think, they don't have any really nice dishes, and let's get them a set. So I went to my boss and I asked him, how much is it going to cost? I don't know how much it was. So we said, we'd like a set of 8, or 10, whatever it was. And we gave that to him as a parting gift, and you thought we gave him $1 million. It was just amazing. And they really were the nicest people. These people would take us into their households with their children and put us up and feed us and everything. It was just a great experience. And then later that summer, at the end of the summer, we went to Japan and toured Japan from Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, Kyoto, Kobe. We went to all of these different ballparks and played all-star teams from Japan for 2 weeks. I'm 18 years old, man. I'm seeing the world at this early age. It was just so fascinating to me. And baseball was really a cool experience. It was a much better experience than football. A lot less violent, let's put it that way. But we played, in front of packed stadium, and it was kind of funny. We'd be taking batting practice, and we're all hitting them out of the park. The Japanese people were just in awe of our power and strength. Well, let me tell you something. I never saw a pitcher in 2 weeks over Japan that threw the ball over the top. Everything was submarine, and all breaking stuff, all slow breaking stuff that, if you hit it, you couldn't hit it very far. But I never saw so many pitchers break different ways in my life.
Boy, that is great stuff. And as we talk to Dan, we have some great collages that are appearing on the TV screen of different parts of his career, different people he played with, etc., including Coach Bum Phillips there, Tony. But in those early days, when you got to the Houston, 4-9-1 in the first season, Dan, you were running for your life. They basically didn't have much of a line. And then you went 2-26. The second and third years.
Back 1-13 seasons.
Wow, those was under Bill Peterson and Sid Gillman. How tough was that mentally, as far as the off seasons and the future looking bleak until basically Bum Phillips came to town? Dan, it must have been tough those couple of years.
The first 4 were pretty tough. It was the organization was never really noted for its stability, and the ownership was was kind of suspect, to say the least. But it was tough. I was really seriously contemplating maybe retiring and trying baseball. And but I hung in there, and because of King Hill, basically King Hill was the new quarterback coach under Sid Gillman, and Sid was really the guy that turned it around for us. He brought in Bum as the defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
You know, I learned a lot of football from Sid. Sid was a real difficult guy to get along, but he became a lot better later in life when I wound up playing with him again with the Eagles. But he was a hard guy to deal with and a hard guy to work with. But I learned a lot of football from him. I really did. You know, he made me a smarter quarterback and you know, more of a tactician, and you know, created the proper thought process to deal with the game. And then Bum Phillips took over, and I was really kind of shocked when Bum took over. I actually was kind of against it because I didn't know Bum from Adam, and he was the defensive coach. And you know, we went through so many coaches, we didn't hardly know their names every year because they wouldn't be around; they'd be gone, you know. And then he went up being the head coach and brought me in to meet with him. And, you know, Bum just had this sincerity about him and this honesty about him that was just, you know, very heartwarming. And lo and behold, he and I became very dear friends throughout our relationship and throughout our life until his dying day, as a matter of fact. And he really just got the right people together. He was very innovative in the game as far as defense was concerned. I mean, he basically invented the 34 defense, perfected it, and you know, that same philosophy, that same type of play is, you know, existent with his son in Denver. You know, Wade Phillips and the Denver Broncos. And you saw what they did last night to the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
you know, he was a great man to play for, and you know, probably the best years of my life when we went to the playoffs for the first time, and we were kind of under a bit of duress. A lot of us were banged up. I had broken ribs. I had to play with the flak jacket the first year in the playoffs, and toward the end of the season, broken ribs. But the flak jacket kind of saved me. I don't know if the flak jacket saved me so much as what the drugs, the Marcaine and Novocaine that they shot me up with. But then the next year we had the playoffs again against Denver. I ruptured my groin, and Kenny Burrow, I think, bruised his hip, and Earl Campbell ruptured his groin, so we were out for the San Diego game. And it was one of the greatest games I've ever seen in my life. And I was on the sideline, strictly a decoy. There was no way I could play. I could hardly walk. Giff Nielsen just called a great game, and Bum called a great defensive game. And, you know, we wind up beating Air Coryell to go to the AFC Championship for the second year in a row against Pittsburgh. I played that game, but was pretty banged up. Bum wanted me to play. He said, "Can you go?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I can go." So I said, "If you want me to go, I'll go." And we did. We gave him hell, but that one little play to Mike Renfro in the corner of the end zone, they wouldn't give us the touchdown for. Kind of
That was something.
Yeah.
But it, you know, it's history. I don't know if we'd have won the game or not, but I sure would have liked our chances going into the fourth quarter with the score tied with the Pittsburgh Steelers at that time. We kind of had them rocking a little bit.
Yeah. Fascinating. And if you know, you look at that Renfro play now, and if they had replay,
yeah,
it could have changed,
Well,
of course.
Guess what? That's why you have it to replay today.
That's right.
yeah.
Is because of that play.
Yeah.
I'm famous for two things: the instant replay and the flak jacket. That's it.
All right, Tony.
Yeah, you know, and Dan, you've never been shy about the fact of you got shot up to play, you had a hard party in life, you know, you played hurt, you had a lot of fun, you hung out with people, and you paid the price for it, and you haven't been shy about that. Do you think that it's a safer environment today for NFL players, or do you think that if you can go back and talk to a few teams, you'd tell them a few things?
No, I don't think it's any safer. You can't make the game safe. They crank out their publicity from the NFL that they're taking and investing all this money into precautions and into research and whatnot. But they had a bunch of guinea pigs in the pre-93 players that they just turned their backs on and shunned. And there's a lot of guys that are living proof that, head trauma from football and causes concussions, causes lingering effects with brain injuries and things like Alzheimer's and Lou Gehrig's disease and whatnot. But they can't make it safer. I mean, the head is going to hit the turf. The head is going to hit the body. You're going to have collisions. There's no way you can prevent it. And they say that the helmet development is better. You have this. You can take an egg and you can put it and pat it up and throw it, but that yolk in the egg is going to break. I don't care what kind of a box you put it in. And you can't do anything about it. I mean, look at the concussion protocols that players have gone through in the last half a season. I mean, you're getting about 2 concussions a team per game. I mean, what's changed?
Yeah, it's a violent game in any era, Tony. That's for sure.
Well, it's a violent game, and we all knew it was a violent game, and we were willing to take that chance. None of us realized that back then that this could happen. If I had realized this could have happened to me, I'd have played baseball, guys. There'd be no second thought about it.
Yeah.
But I love the game. I love the players that I played with, and we made sacrifices. We all made sacrifices to play to win. But call it foolish pride or machismo or whatever you want to call it. But in the end, it's just a game. We're talking about people's lives. Guys, like Mike Webster, that were living in the back of cars and couldn't even hold a conversation, intelligent conversation. And that shouldn't be that way. If we're willing to take those risks, and if we're willing to play the game knowingly and knowing those risks are inherent, then fine. If I get hurt, take care of me. Take care of my family.
Yeah.
Don't turn your back on me like they have 20,000 players, pre-93ers. And they keep filing with this rhetoric, and the game keeps getting bigger, and the revenues keep getting bigger, but they don't grandfather anything back to the older players. Just don't think that's right.
Yeah,
I would agree.
And Tony had read your book over the weekend, Taking Flak, My Life in the Fast Lane, Dan, and he was telling me all about it. It's just a fascinating life. And you had mentioned already about the flak jacket. You had broken ribs. You punctured a lung. What brought about that whole idea of wearing the flak jacket? Was there someone responsible for doing that for you, Dan? And was it restricting at all back in the day?
It was a guy by the name of Byron Donzies, and who kind of fancied himself as a kind of a half-ass inventor. And I'm laying in the hospital with broken ribs, and I hear this knock at the door. I mean, just like the book says, this guy sticks his head in. He's a professor. Yeah. So he comes walking in. He's carrying a brown paper bag, and his buddy's carrying a baseball bat. And I'm thinking, these guys must have bet the ranch they lost their asses, and they're going to thumb them with the and take me out of here in this brown paper bag. So lo and behold, he pulls this piece of Kevlar out, and he puts it up against his ribs, and his buddy gets a good grip on the bat and whacks him 3 times. He doesn't even blink.
Wow.
And I said, I want one of those. And he said, okay. And he literally stuffed it in the bag, turned around, walked out of the room. And I got out of the hospital the next day. I think it was Monday or so. And we're at the practice field. And he comes in with this prototype, and it was made out of very rugged, rough-looking prototype. It was made from a Navy SEAL life vest, which were very thin air pockets, and it had this Kevlar patch over the area where my ribs were broken. And it was the only thing about it. I mean, it was just hot because it was this rubber vest, and you're playing inside in the dome. You're playing in 70-degree weather, but you get in the course of the game, you're getting worked up and sweating, and man, it was kind of dehydrating, a little bit, but it worked. I got hit. I mean, it worked. It saved me. But I played with that and finished the season with it. And we went to Miami and the first game of the playoffs and wound up beating them and then going to New England the next week. And I mean, they were going to come after me. I mean, they made it perfectly clear. Get this guy with the vest and knock him out. And we happened to get a couple big plays on him early and got ahead in the game, and then we started giving him a little Earl Campbell left and a little Earl Campbell right to run the clock out, and ultimately won the game. And then we went to Pittsburgh, and the floodgates came through, and it was just one of those days. We had what they probably loved that weather up there, but it was not good for guys that are used to playing in the Astrodome.
And you mentioned Earl Campbell, Dan. That's 78, 79. Those 2 years, he was over 3,000 yards, and one of the greats we've ever seen. And there's no question. Just your comments on him. How is he doing today? We've heard some, conflicting things how he's been, but give us just a minute on Earl Campbell.
Well, I love him like a brother. I mean, he's my brother from a different mother, as a lot of the guys on that team are. Yeah. And, he's not getting around real good. But a lot of people think it's because of football, and it's really not. He just has a degenerative disease, and it affects his lower extremities. He's having a rough go, but he's Earl's tough, and he's got a bright outlook every day on life, and, he's as tough a man as he can be, and but he's doing well. He's got his sausage business company and some other products in the grocery business, and he's doing quite well. He's working with his sons and really enjoying that. But I think he's over 5 years sober now. We both kind of gave up the drink about the same time, and he's doing real well.
Just a couple more minutes with former quarterback Dan Pastorini. Tony.
And, Dan, we got Dan Pastorini, the football player, Dan Pastorini, the baseball player, Dan Pastorini, the race boat driver, Dan Pastorini, the race car driver, and Dan Pastorini, the actor. Tell us about your acting.
Okay, the first four were qualifications that I was capable of. That last one...
That's awesome.
It was, it's kind of funny. I had a lot of opportunities, and the game gave me that opportunity. And I was young, and I was encouraged, and why not? Give it a shot. If you're not afraid, that's part of acting. If you're not afraid of making an ass out of yourself, it might make it a business. And I was really kind of taking it seriously once I got released from the Rams, and I was in an acting school, and then I was doing some scenes. In fact, Tim Rosovich and I were in the same school together, and I got called up by Vermeil to come to Philadelphia in '82, and he called me. And I said, Dick, I really don't want to play, but Dick and I had known each other for many years, and he convinced me into coming back to playing in Philadelphia. And again, I was reunited with Sid Gillman, and he was very fair about it. He said, I'm not going to, you know the system. It's the system you grew up with Sid. It hasn't changed. And he said, I'm not going to play you this year unless it's absolutely necessary. But he said the next year you and Jaworski will come in together, and whoever the better quarterback is going to be my quarterback, and that's fair enough with me. So I signed, and they had the strike, and the strike tore Dick apart, and he winds up retiring after that and getting out of football. I never did quite get the shot to compete with Jaworski, and kind of ended that year, and that was it. But anyway, getting back to the acting part, I had the opportunity to work with a guy by the name of Sal Dano in Los Angeles, and he was, we had to get up and put up scenes and stuff, and it was very, very challenging, to get up in front of people and play something other than yourself. And, it could have been something, it might have been, I don't know. But I had fun. I had met some great people in the industry, and they were very supportive of me, and I was grateful that, they allowed me to come into that realm and experience it.
Again, you can follow
but
Dan.
I wasn't very good at it.
Yeah. On Twitter, you can follow Dan at taking_flak, and also Facebook. I noticed Dan Pastorini's Quality Foods. Dan, you kind of did get into that a little bit.
Your folks, I guess, were an influence in that.
Yes.
Yeah, my folks and my partner, actually, my partners. My parents were in the restaurant business for 37 years, and these were kind of recipes that were born from my father. A lot of chefs, they'll be seasoning something that have different trays with all kinds of different seasonings, and you soon take a pinch here, a pinch there, a pinch there, and throw it all in there. My dad and my buddy, Lee, was down in Bevian, and at Rube Steakhouse in Simi Valley, California, had a similar recipe that he used in his steakhouse and everything else. And we used to have a Christmas for Children's party every year, and we invited all the public to come out, and the only interest was a unwrapped toy for kids. And we had all the race car drivers in Southern California, all the car clubs, all the motorcycle companies, or all the motorcycle clubs, race boat club. I mean, we had a big display of it was a car show, basically. Mm-hmm. And it was very successful, and we raised, a lot of money, made a lot of families in the Simi Valley happy with the toys for kids. But my partner and I would get in a little competition in the kitchen. So I'm sitting there, I got my dad's recipe all mixed in a bowl, and he's got his family recipe in the bowl. And I just playfully reached in and grabbed a handful of mine and threw it in another bowl, and grabbed a handful of his, threw it in another bowl, stirred it up, and we put it on some French fries, and looked at each other and said, "That's pretty good," And, I mean, this is back in 1985. Yeah. And we just put it to market 3 years ago, 2012, I guess.
That's great.
Wow.
So it's really, I'm not saying this to blow smoke, but I mean, we've not had anybody that doesn't like this stuff. And we get great mail order business throughout the country, and we have 3 flavors now. We've got the Texas style rub, and we've got the hickory flavor version of that.
Wow. And
then we've got a garlic and herb spice, which is really good. And all 3 they're not just rubs, they're more seasonings. They're good on everything. I've actually put the Texas style rub on vanilla ice cream, and it's good. Wow. So don't hate me.
Nah, that's it sounds great. Again, our viewers, check it out. Dan Pastorini's Quality Foods on Facebook. Like that page. And again, the book,
yes, please like it and send in recipes.
Isn't that cool? You can do that. And the book, Taking Flak, My Life in the Fast Lane. There is so much more we can get to. You've been very, very generous with your
really
time,
have,
Dan.
Thank you.
I want to thank you again on behalf of my father for giving him some joyous days during your career. You are,
well, God bless him.
To me, one of the...
Now, I'll tell you what, now he's eating well up there in heaven with my mom and dad.
I can guarantee you that. Yeah. He would always say to me, we'd be watching on the TV, Dante Anthony Pastorini. Now, that's a name for you. That was my father. But
that's Italian.
That's Italian, and he just loved you so much. And again, one of the great quarterbacks / athletes of our time, Dan Pastorini. We thank you for being with us, Dan. Hopefully, maybe down the road we could talk again. We've just hit the surface of your career. It's such an amazing and had such a far scope. But we'll be in touch. And again, we can't thank you enough for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Good night, Dan.
Good night, Dan.
Take care now.
Thank you.